This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Heather Sells. We begin with the deadly shooting at a Southern California synagogue over the weekend. It happened on the last day of Passover and left one woman dead and 3 other people injured, including the congregation's rabbi. Mark Martin joins us now in the CBN newsroom with more. Mark?
Heather, the shooting happened inside a synagogue in Poway, California, which is near San Diego. Now, investigators say 19-year-old John Ernest walked in and opened fire. Rabbi Israel Goldstein was one of the 4 people shot. Goldstein lost a finger. 60-year-old Lori Gilbert Kay lost her life and reportedly shielded her rabbi from the alleged gunman. Her friends are calling her a hero. ABC News reports houses of worship across the country are increasing security.
This is not supposed to happen. This isn't Nazi Germany. This isn't a pogrom. This is right here, Poway.
Very scary.
Witnesses say the alleged gunman fired as many as 15 rounds before his gun jammed and a military veteran chased him away.
Ran up to him and I yelled at him and he dropped his weapon and he ran out and I chased him out of the sanctuary.
Hundreds mourned at a vigil on Sunday, and Goldstein received a call of support from President Trump. ABC News reports that investigators say this is not the only hate crime connected to the alleged gunman. They say he wrote online about attempting to burn down a mosque last month, calling it a tribute to previous massacres against Jews and Muslims. Heather, back to you.
Mark, what do we know about where the suspect is at right now?
He remains in police custody without bail. In addition to homicide charges, he may face a hate crime charge when he appears in court later this week. Back to you.
Thank you, Mark. And joining us now is the Associate Dean of the Simon Wiesenthal Center, a leading Jewish human rights organization, Rabbi Abraham Cooper. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Heather.
Tell us what you know about the attack. We know that it could have been so much worse. Who were some of the heroes that you know about?
Well, first, obviously, the attack was a copycat, both in word and deed, of the Pittsburgh attack. It was 6 months to the day, and the horrific attacks in New Zealand and Sri Lanka. And this young man was drinking from the same anti-Semitic, anti-Black, you might say anti-Christian narrative that is now so popular online. In a few hours, we'll be burying the heroic woman who saved her rabbi, someone who was in synagogue to say memorial prayers for her loved ones and for the victims of the Holocaust, is now herself a victim. And also take note that it was at a Chabad synagogue. Chabad is kind of the spiritual Peace Corps of the Jewish people. They're all over the world. And in fact, they are now, unfortunately, been targets both of a domestic terrorist here in the U.S. and in Mumbai, in an ISIS a type of attack that left a young rabbi, his wife, and 4 other Jews murdered in India. So this isn't the first time. What we are seeing now, unfortunately, is a trend where extremists, domestic extremists, lone wolves here in the United States, are beginning to mimic the approach of ISIS in terms of using terrorism. And of course, a huge problem across the board is social media. And one of the things that we all have to insist upon.
Right. Well, I want to ask you about social media, too, and just, you know, the whole motive of this shooter. It seems so difficult to combat this type of hatred when people are just going online and easily accessing it. What do you think is the correct response to this violence?
Yes, well, we've been dealing with the companies now for a quarter of a century. And number one, no more live streaming, as what happened in New Zealand, the live streaming of a massacre of 50 people of prayer. The companies know how to make sure it isn't live. CBN doesn't go live. CBS doesn't go live. That has to change. And beyond that, the companies also have to do more to degrade the marketing capabilities of hate and terrorism on the internet, and especially social media. And finally, we need our political leaders. I was so glad to see that the president spoke to the rabbi, and as an American president should. But we need Nancy Pelosi, the president of the United States, Democrats and Republicans on these various committees to stop weaponizing hate, to speak to their base and start a new bipartisanship to indicate to our own kids and to the country and to the enemies that hate crimes actually something that will be a top priority to combat. And we'll have to give some more money and, if necessary, change some of the rules of engagement to allow police, national law enforcement, and intelligence agencies to do a deep dive into social media and find out who's doing what, and hopefully be able to interdict those who've made a decision to act, and to stop allowing for the emergence of hate as part of the subculture of social media.
Rabbi, we just have about 30 seconds, but how is the Jewish community responding? How do you see this affecting worship going forward?
Well, the wonderful woman who gave her life, her brother is a member of our synagogue here in West Los Angeles, will be at the Shiva house. We feel we're all one family, and when this happens, it's meant to hurt every Jew, and we are hurting, but we have deep resolve inspired by Rabbi Goldstein that we're not going to allow this kind of behavior to push us into the corner. And finally, I really urge my friends in the Christian community and Muslim leaders, you really do need, in America in 2019, basic security for every house of prayer. It's going to be a long time before we can take down those security measures. Well,
very, very sobering. Our condolences to you. Thank you for your time, Rabbi Cooper.
Thank you for your interest and commitment.
Well, a strong response from Israel today. Israel's ambassador to the United Nations is demanding action by the international community against anti-Semitism following the attack.
The time for talking and having a conversation is over. What Israel and the Jewish community around the world demands is action. And now. It is simple. Those who engage in anti-Semitism must be punished, whether it's here at the UN, political leaders, editors, policy pundits, or college professors. It doesn't matter. Anti-Semitism should have no place in our society until it becomes criminal. This bigotry will persist, it will fester, and it is only a matter of time until it erupts again in violence and bloodshed. It is unacceptable that worshippers should look back while they are praying.
Dannon also shared his support for the anticipated peace plan from the Trump administration expected in the coming weeks. It has been a little over a week since the deadly Easter Sunday attacks in Sri Lanka, and security forces there are continuing to go door to door searching for suspects and explosive-making material. Over the weekend, militants linked to the suicide bombing opened fire and set off explosives during a raid by Sri Lankan security forces on a house. 15 people were killed, including a number of militants. Meanwhile, a vigil in memory of the victims was held Sunday, where the Archbishop of Colombo led prayers. Residents say the bombings have changed everything, and people are afraid to go about their daily lives. Sri Lanka's president has placed a ban on all kinds of face coverings that conceal people's identities. The emergency law took effect today, and it prevents Muslim women from veiling their faces. CBN senior international correspondent George Thomas joins me now. And George, ISIS claimed responsibility for the attacks in Sri Lanka, and now there is a new image of the group's leader out today. Tell us about that.
Yeah, this is quite significant. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the last time we saw him was in 2014, and you see the images there published just a few hours ago by the group Site Intelligence. The bottom one shows Baghdadi in 2014. This new one, he looks quite healthy, a little overweight. He's got a white beard. But on the top right-hand picture, he's talking to some lieutenants in a very casual conversation. And Heather, he makes, which is very, very significant, he makes reference to the Sri Lanka attacks. Now, it was done in an audio. It wasn't part of the 18-minute video interview. It looks like this was added at the last minute, right before the publication of it. But it is very, very significant, especially in the context of all the efforts that we have made against the group ISIS in Syria and Iraq. For him to come out with this image, this is obviously proof of life that he is still alive.
All right. And in Sri Lanka, we've been talking about concern about more suicide attacks. There have been warnings. What does it look like at this point?
Yeah, well, right now, the head of the National Police Intelligence outfit just released a letter to politicians, senior police and security forces And this is what the letter says, and I think we have video here. It says that there could be another wave of attacks. Specifically, they're very, very concerned about individuals who are wearing military fatigues and using vans. And so that's the next threat that they're very, very concerned about, potentially attacks coming today and or tomorrow.
It sounds like the whole country is really just
very much so. On edge.
In shock, on edge. We also know there's more information about the attacks that have come out. What's the latest that we know about what went down?
Yeah, well, within the few hours after the attacks happened, the head of the intelligence apparatus released this letter saying, listen, back on April 11th, I sent out a very detailed information to the various security agencies, including the president and the prime minister, saying in detail, laying out in detail the names of the individuals who could be used, who could be part of the operation, the actual group that is involved, and yet nothing was done. And so there's an intense amount of pressure on the Sri Lankan government saying, listen, you had all of this information, very, very detailed, and now the president of Sri Lanka is pushing back, saying, hey, well, hold up. I didn't really see this intelligence, but a high-ranking official within the intelligence apparatus came out disputing that, saying this information was passed on to him, landed on his table, and is basically saying to the president of Sri Lanka that what you're saying is incorrect.
It's incredibly tragic. Talk too about these raids. They're going house to house. Are they finding anything that's helpful?
Yeah, you better believe it. I mean, some of the video that you see coming out of these raids are quite remarkable. In one scene, as we go to the video, in one scene, we see they captured an ISIS flag. They saw an ISIS flag in one of the safe houses. But then there's all this bomb-making material. I mean, in one scene, there are over 100,000 ball bearings, which are then compressed into these suicide vests. And the more ball bearings you have, the greater the impact in terms of shrapnel. They had drones and all kinds of other material, but very, very shocking. The time it took to put all of this together just shows how sophisticated an attack this was. And they were planning to do even more.
All right, and I just want to ask you briefly before we go too about these veils.
Yeah.
I would think that there would be pushback. People wouldn't want to go along with this ban, but it sounds like people are agreeing to this.
They are. In fact, the president said just in the last 24 hours as he made this statement, in the context of the national emergency that he declared, he said that for the purposes of identifying individuals, they need to be able to see the full face. Typically, Muslim women wear their burqas. Either they are completely veiled or just have a head covering. But this is not going to be a permanent ruling. They will at some point lift the ban once they feel like the investigation has been complete.
Wow. All right. Well, George Thomas, thank you so much.
You're most welcome.
Coming up, how pro-life activists are responding to a landmark ruling on an abortion law in Kansas. Stay with us.
CBN presents The I Wills of God, your path to overcoming fear and anxiety.
We're going to talk about some of the incredible promises God has made to His children.
In Pat Robertson's newest teaching, you'll discover the I Wills of God. I will rescue him, protect him, answer him, be with him in trouble, deliver him, honor him, satisfy him with long life, show him my salvation, and see amazing stories of God's promises in action.
What I felt was loved and treasured.
God spared my life twice in 3 days.
The good Lord had given me a second chance.
Break free from stress and despair.
The Lord doesn't want you to live in fear, but to know the rewards given to those who love God.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit CBN.com. The I Wills of God, your path to overcoming fear and anxiety.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream. the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
Welcome back. A setback for the pro-life movement. The Kansas Supreme Court ruled Friday that a ban on dismemberment abortion violates the state's Bill of Rights. The court took the position that the Kansas State Bill of Rights includes the right to abortion. Pro-life groups are outraged. The National Right to Life releasing this statement saying, quote, dismemberment abortion kills a living unborn baby by tearing her apart limb from limb. It is unconscionable that the Kansas Supreme Court would allow living unborn babies to be killed in such a gruesome manner. Here now with more is constitutional law expert and attorney Jenna Ellis. Jenna, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Tell us, abortion rights activists are calling this a landmark ruling. Do you consider it to be? Could it encourage other states to roll back laws that limit abortions?
It is landmark in the sense that this is the first time that the Kansas State Supreme Court has attempted to shoehorn a so-called right to abortion through the state constitution rather than simply relying on Roe versus Wade. So we've seen historically since 1973 that the states and the activists there who want abortion have simply relied on the United States Supreme Court. But now that we have a conservative majority and Roe versus Wade is likely to be overturned in the next year or two, we're seeing that state courts are now trying to have the same holding that Roe held and try to find a so-called right to abortion in their state constitution rather than only relying on the federalist system. And so while this is really good in the sense that we're seeing that the Supreme Courts in the states are not relying on Roe versus Wade, now the battle is going to be in the states.
Interesting. In this case, it was a dismemberment abortion law. Do you see other pro-life laws, if you will, that are particularly vulnerable right now since the states are becoming the new focus?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, now that the battleground is going to be in the states, then every person who is pro-life is going to have to make sure to be very involved with your state legislature. And so any types of abortion laws, whether it's restricting abortion or whether it's trying to make abortion more accessible, those types of laws are not only going to be going through the legislatures. We've seen heartbeat bills get passed in states like Ohio. That's very encouraging, but we're also seeing these legal challenges. And so what we have to do as Christians is make sure that we're not only fighting these legislative and legal battles, but we're also trying to change hearts and minds by looking at the science behind this. We're seeing that millennials are the most pro-life generation, and it's really encouraging actually that in 6 states there are currently only 1 abortion clinic just because women are now not choosing abortion even if it's legally permissible.
Really interesting. Also want to ask you about, Kansas in some ways has been on the front lines for the fight over abortion. Many remember the abortion doctor George Tiller, who was shot and killed by an anti-abortion extremist in 2009. So do you see a pro-abortion victory in Kansas as also being really a symbolic win, if you will, given that state's history?
I think it's symbolic in the sense that this is now on the front lines of the national conversation again. And so many pro-life advocates really thought that we may never get to this point because the liberal activists are telling us very untruthfully that Roe versus Wade is settled law, that abortion will always be a so-called right in the United States, and we will never have this national conversation again. So to have this start in Kansas and really see that, I mean, that this law is, and this holding is going to be challenged up to the U.S. Supreme Court. And even pro-life activists that are there are saying that we need to have a constitutional amendment, a state constitutional amendment to specifically protect unborn life. Those are things that we can do. And I think the national conversation is being propelled in that direction in a way that honestly Christians didn't think possible. And I think it's such a wonderful, amazing God that we serve that our national conversation is now directed toward pro-life in a way that we haven't seen since 1973.
A really amazing time. Jenna Ellis, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Up next, one author takes a closer look at Trump's presidency and why his enemies played a role in him being elected.
It's about the competition.
I kind of put that pressure on myself, and I think people had expectations.
It's about overcoming.
We use this phrase all the time, keep chopping, keep practicing hard.
It's about going the distance.
You know, I think as a father, it's my job, to lead. Just be the best husband and father I can be.
Watch Going the Distance with Sean Brown Saturday night at 7:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Woohoo! Hi, Superbook fans. Here's something else you'll love. It's the new Superbook Bible app. It's packed with games, activities, and Superbook episodes that you can watch for free. Oh, no! There's trivia, a fun daily devotional, and answers to your Bible questions. Plus, an easy-to-understand Bible the whole family will enjoy. You can even create your own Superbook character. Ta-da! Whoa!
No spur falls, man. Come.
Sorry, pardon me. Sorry, excuse me. Ouch!
Are you getting this?
Earn super points to win daily prizes, too. And so much more! Time to get back to my adventures. See you soon! It's the new Superbook Bible app. Free downloads on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon.
Discover the I wills of God. I will rescue him, protect him, answer him, be with him in trouble, deliver him, honor him, satisfy him with long life, show him my salvation.
What I felt was loved and treasured.
God spared my life twice in 3 days.
The good Lord had given me a second chance.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit CBN.com. The I wills of God, the latest teaching from Pat Robertson.
Welcome back. Historian and political analyst Victor Davis Hanson isn't a natural Donald Trump supporter, but he puts feelings aside in his new book called The Case for Trump. It is about how the president's foes gave Americans plenty of reasons to elect him. As Paul Strand reports, the author says it could happen all over again.
Those who see Trump's election as some sort of fluke don't understand how disaffected millions of voters out here in middle America were with how the ruling class was ruling them and stifling the economy.
It might be stagnant because we were overregulated, we were discouraging energy production, and we were not letting the animal spirits out. In other words, we were telling people of talent and experience, you didn't build that, or now is not the time to profit, or I think at some point you made enough money.
Author Victor Hanson believes a growing number of voters thought President Obama personified the ruling class's attitudes.
They didn't like the talking down to, Americans can be lazy, Americans can be racist, the apology tour. It seems like when he went overseas, he talked about us as if he was not part of us. That bothered people.
Trump's Make America Great Again slogan gave them an opposite message. No more defeatism. We're going to start winning again.
China's not fated to run the world, and it's not going to bully you anymore, and you can't have a sovereign nation with open borders. And there's no such thing as deindustrialization. We're going to start building and manufacturing in these old red spelt cities.
It turned many non-voters and Democrat voters into Trump voters in states expected to provide Hillary Clinton the winning margin.
He was able, with this message and this delivery, to make 5 to 8 to 9 million people turn out to vote. They were the ones that gave him these narrow margins, 80,000, 100, that flipped all those states.
Trump detractors see his Twitter rants and political incorrectness as offensive, but his base seems to love it.
Trump is capable of saying anything, anywhere, anytime to anyone, and that bothered other people more than it did them. And they just wanted to let go. It was almost like cutting the leash on a pit bull and just go out and bite them.
Historian Hanson sees in the feisty Trump the reflection of Harry Truman, another much maligned man during his presidency, who stubbornly defied those around him in his efforts to make the world a better place.
Truman didn't listen to people. I mean, he said, the Russians can't be trusted. We got to have containment. And then the Roosevelt guys in the State Department were outraged. The Pentagon didn't want to desegregate the armed forces as rapidly. Dean Acheson, George Marshall said, you can't recognize Israel. Just don't do that. And civil libertarians came, we can't have a CIA. And he did all of these things just as he pleased.
Hansen believes Trump's reforms and disruptive ways scare traditional Washington, or what some label the deep state.
They're permanent employees who have allegiance to nobody but themselves. And then it's predicated on always growing, so they tend to be more favorable to progressives and big government.
As the non-politician threatens this bureaucratic empire, Hansen says the other side plays legal hardball.
It's a Soviet style, we have the defendant, he's guilty, just give us the crime now. And we've got to find the crime because we know Trump's. So they're going after him in a way they've never gone after another president.
Hansen sees this movement as a bigger threat to Trump than the actual opposition party. He believes the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez types are pushing Democrat candidates so far left, they'll scare people away with policies like radical abortion, the Green New Deal, and socialism.
Those are not winning issues. And one of the questions in 2020 will be how adroitly will they back off from them?
If they don't, Hansen believes that they might reenact the left's utter defeat at the hands of Richard Nixon in 1972.
And they went the full McGovern crazy stuff, Woodstock Nation and all that. And people, it's the second biggest landslide in history.
Paul Strand, CBN News, Indiana.
As the world watches from the outside,
it's a big diplomatic tug-of-war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline, Friday night at 9:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Orphans Promise is committed to loving and serving at-risk children, to helping keep families together, and to creating opportunities for strong and sustainable communities around the world. We're working in over 60 countries around the world, and with your help, we can do even more. There's an old African proverb I love that says, if you want to run fast, run alone. But if you want to run far, run together. At Orphans Promise, we want to run far so we can touch the lives of as many orphaned and vulnerable children as possible. But we don't want to go alone. We're out to change the world, one child, one family, one community at a time. Will you join us?
Meet the pastors who are preaching the gospel in a fresh, fearless way. I'm Roberto Torres Cedillo. Join me each week for Next Gen Voices. And watch God transform a generation.
A new art display in the UK is paying tribute to hundreds of U.S. troops killed during World War II. The art installation displayed 749 boot prints of soldiers and sailors killed during the Exercise Tiger tragedy on April 28th in 1944. The exhibit was revealed Sunday, marking the 75th anniversary of the battle, and will raise money for veteran employment projects. That's it for us. Have a great day.